How's everyone doing out there? This is Chef, New Zealand Murder History Podcast. I'm coming to you live from the Red Light District in Christchurch. Yeah, this place is, it's the Red Light District. There's no girls out here at the moment. It's early yet, I guess. They might come out a bit later. I'm not really sure what time they come out, but yeah. So I got a pretty interesting show for you today. Yeah, let's set this camera up good. Alrighty. See that intersection in front of us? Well, that's the cursed corner. Girls who stand on that street corner, well, they go missing. Yeah, it's horrific. Corner of Peterborough Street and Manchester Street. I don't know why that corner is no good, but it's not a good place to stand if you're hooking, that's for sure. This episode of New Zealand Murder History Podcast is about the South Island sex worker murders. It's not suitable for children. We'll discuss drug use, sex crimes, including sexual murder. And these cases I'm going to discuss in brief are all nasty. Super messed up. So if you really feel depressed or like you're struggling with some kind of psychological problem, maybe just give this one a miss, you know? My show is just for educational purposes. It's not to offend anyone. Certainly not to offend the girls in this episode that will be discussed, or even really offend the killers, you know? I'm just making this show for the internet, and I hope you all like it. These are the stories of women who were failed by a society that judged them, pushed them to the margins where they were easy targets for a psycho woman hater to take out all his rage. In New Zealand, sex work has been legal since 2003. So don't write anything mean in my comments about sex workers. They're doing their job. If you don't like sex workers, that's fine. Don't come to New Zealand. And although the sex industry has been legal since 2003, they've cleaned it up a bit, but it's still not really a safe place for women and girls, particularly street women who stand on the street. Perhaps women who work in parlours have some more protection, depending on which parlour they work for, of course, but it's obviously, well, anyway. Blokes also get trick-rolled, and male prostitutes are at risk of gay predators. The most dangerous places is actually right here, the red lights of Christchurch. It's the killing fields. Manchester Street, yeah, this is hardcore. Also, Karangahape Road in Auckland, that's another big one. There's other ones too, but those two are always in the headlines. No one say mean things in my comments section about any of these girls. Alright, let's kick it. Renee Duck-Manton was a Christchurch sex worker. She got sexually murdered by this sicko, an ex-taxi driver from Gambia. It was the 14th of May 2016, and Renee Duck-Manton was working on the same corner Mallory Manning was hooking the night she was murdered. That's the corner right in front here that I'm filming. "22-year-old Renee Duck-Manton was dressed in a short white dress and a jacket. She had limited movement on her left side from cerebral palsy." Now, I don't actually know much about cerebral palsy. I thought it was a more debilitating condition, but she may have had a mild version of the illness. I'm really not certain. But what I'm saying is she got around okay, but she wouldn't stand a chance fighting an able-bodied opponent. Not at all. And no one really knows exactly what happened that night, but on the 14th of May 2016, but her killer's internet history, we know, and it's really sketchy. He's looking up sex worker murders, and necrophilia. So yeah, it's probably a very horrific murder. Not probably, it was. Renee Duck Manton died from strangulation. Her body was set on fire down by the Rakaia River. A 31-year-old Freezing Works butcher was arrested 10 days later. Judge gave him 18 years for that one. Saini Marong said he thought of prostitutes a bit like the meat he butchers at work. He was under a deportation order at the time of the murder. Let's all hope and pray that when he does get out, New Zealand sends him back where he came from. Piss off, Saini Marong. Back where you came from. Susie Sutherland was 36 years old when she was not in contact with her family in Auckland. She had no kids. Jules Patrick Burns, a South African bloke, picked her up off Manchester Street, driving his white Honda Prelude. It was April 16th, 2005, and Susie Sutherland's naked body would be found leaned up against a fence on a vacant section on Peterborough Street. That's the street that intersects the street that dude just pulled out of there. A black car driving up the road. That's Peterborough. Anyway. The following year, Jules Patrick Burns got done for the murder. He gets 17 years. Susie Sutherland scratched the back of his neck with she scratched the back of his neck. They were obviously fighting when he was strangling her. His DNA was found under her fingernails. Good on you, Susie Sutherland. Susie Sutherland was a morphine addict who also used Ritalin while working. It's possible she got sold some dirty drugs, like some cheap amphetamines laced with anything. I mean, it's Christchurch in 2005. Who knows what was going around then? Anyway, I only say this because another client said that she was acting very erratic that night and just trying to get the job done. Yeah, so it's, I don't know, it's possible that in her wasted out state she wasn't doing her job up to this bloke's standard, which may have enraged him, resulting in murder. I'm not saying that, he should murder her or anything. I mean, come on, ask for a refund. I mean, it's horrific. But yeah, that's a possibility. She also may have just been, doing her job very well, despite being high on Ritalin, and he decides to murder her anyway. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, anyway, very sad. Her family buried her in Christchurch, not Auckland, because that's where Susie Sutherland chose to live. It was the 2nd of February of the year 2000. Lisa Blackie was hitchhiking to the west coast. She was trying to get to Greymouth. The 20-year-old sex worker worked for a Queenstown parlour. She was on the run from the Timaru henchmen. That's not quite their real name, but anyway. Some people believe they are behind her murder. Personally, though, for this case, I actually don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, the bloke who got done for the murder, he says he didn't do it. His name is Tim David Taylor. I'll talk about him a bit more in a minute. I mean, I honestly reckon he probably did do it, but I do know that there's a lot of inconsistencies with the police version of events, so it's... I mean, I don't think he acted alone. Was it the henchman? I mean, if she got killed in Timaru, I would say yes. Timaru's not that far south of Christchurch. It's South Canterbury. Christchurch is mid-Canterbury. Could have been them. Who knows? Anyway, there is a really good episode of The Investigator with Brian Bruce. It's on YouTube and you should totally check it out. Brian Bruce Documentaries, Lisa Blackie case. His entire show is good. I'd recommend it. I think it's made for TV, but I know it from YouTube. Anyway, in this episode, he gets an average bloke and a fit bloke who goes to the gym a lot, and they try to lift this 100 kg rock from the ground up, and neither one of them can do it. Although the fitness guy does lift it up a bit, but he has to drop it because it's too heavy. This is relevant because Lisa Blakey, I think it's Lisa Blakey. I used to think it was Lisa Blackie, but I've heard it pronounced Blakey. Anyway, Lisa Blakey's body was found pinned down with a 104 kg boulder in the river up Porter's Pass. It's actually my belief that a super strong man probably could lift that boulder from the ground up, but they would have to be like world's strongest man tank, you know what I mean? But it would take at least two blokes who weren't He-Man to lift that boulder, and yeah. Could Timothy David Taylor have done it by himself? No. I remember this case because I was 15 at the time. It was just after Kirsty Bentley got killed in Ashburton. I'm not going to do a massive podcast on Lisa Blakey, but yeah, like I said, YouTube search Brian Bruce docos Lisa Blakey and check it out. It's a rather comprehensive look at the Lisa Blakey case. Anyway, I will say that Tim David Taylor looks suspect to me. He says he just picked her up hitchhiking and he dropped her off alive and well. Story changes a few times. Long story short, there's plenty of unknown. Okay, I'm going to skip Mallory Manning's one because I'm writing another podcast about Mallory Manning. There's just too much information for this one. It doesn't quite fit right when I read it out loud, so we're going to come back to her another day. But yeah, she was standing on this corner the night she went missing. Tyler Lynette Manning. That one's still unsolved. Anyway, let's rewind a minute. August 17th, 1995, Angela Blackmore was a stripper. She was 8 months pregnant when she was stabbed 39 times in her neck and chest in the kitchen of her house where she lived in Wainoni, Christchurch. She was stabbed to death with a toddler asleep in the next room. The killer would get away with this major crime for 25 years. The police done well to actually get this bloke. They at least did a better job than the Christchurch judge that gave him 10 years no parole. That's weak. He said because the case was 1995, the sentence has to correspond with whatever sentences were being dished out by the courts at the time. Well, there's more information on this one, but other people allegedly involved are before the courts, so I choose not to discuss further. Rest in peace, young mum, Angela Blackmore. This next one, I took information from stuff.co.nz, 4th of December, 2020. Man murdered Christchurch woman during psychotic episode. Also, the 6th of November 2020, Otago Daily Times. Christchurch sex worker, I sliced and diced her. The last South Island sex worker to get murdered by a client was the day before New Year's Eve, 2019 to 2020. It was Bella Tapania. She got... Oh man, this one's really, really, really bad. They're all bad, but you know what I mean. She got found by police in the passenger seat of a car just outside of Christchurch Airport, with this banana fruitcake psycho sitting in the front driver's seat. The 34-year-old sex worker was almost gone when the cops got to her. She was stabbed up severely and had her head bashed with a rock. Anyway, ultimately Bella and this awful man and even his family were failed by Mental Health Services New Zealand. Hold up, let's rewind 24 hours. And the 43-year-old plasterer is having a psychotic breakdown. Kane van Hemert. Anyway, he heard sometime over the Christmas holidays that his ex-partner had a new man in her life. This done his head in. And so now his family are worried about Kane, and they were right to be worried. The man suffers from bipolar, but that's, not really, Anyway, the point, okay, so the stuff this guy's saying is actually really funny. I mean, it would be funny if he didn't go on to kill Bella, but he started acting bizarrely, texting and calling his family, asking for a time machine. Then he calls 111 and asks how he can become a police officer. He was ranting and rambling about drugs and narcs, and he asked the 111 people for a time machine so he could go back in time and shoot his father. I wonder if he wanted to do that so he would then never exist. God, that's so weird. Fucking time machine. I mean, what the hell? Anyway, that last 3 sentences was word for word from stuff.co.nz article. So yeah, you'd expect some kind of mental health intervention. Well, his ex-partner called mental health services, and they found him in the shower, swearing and talking out loud, banging his head against the wall. Apparently, he'd been in the shower for hours. So a nurse and a doctor are now on the scene. The nurse, to her credit, calls police and asks for assistance getting Kane Van Hemert to hospital. She told the cop on the phone, "No, he isn't aggressive, although I wouldn't like to get too close to him. He is psychotic." Words like that from a fully qualified nurse should have been enough. I'm not sure if she was on the phone to just the operator or police. But yeah, this is a hopeless failure is what I'm getting at. The nurse was literally with him. She would not have called for the police if she thought that she and the doctor could handle the situation with assistance from the man's family. She just wouldn't have him. I mean, come on. In the end, it was settled that the doctor would give him medication to see if he settled down, and he would voluntarily report to Hill Morton Hospital the next day, which was New Year's Eve. This is rubbish. Of course he wasn't going to check himself in. The situation was well out of control. That's why the mental health team were there on the phone to the police for backup. Well, I actually think... I'm sorry, I'm getting quite aggravated. This case really bothers me, but I think this guy took the meds just because he was manipulating, not because he actually wanted to get well. Van Hemert calms down a notch and has a nap. Probably because he was saving his strength for the murder he was planning. He wakes up in the early hours of the 31st of December, 2019, arms himself before sneaking out the house to go for a drive. Stealing license plates off parked cars, he swaps out his own plates before heading down to Manchester Street, the South Island's busiest red light district. I think the medication actually assisted an already murderous Kane to get the job done. I mean, his outward appearance would have been calm, but internally the madness was still burning. And Bella wasn't stupid at all. She was a 34-year-old career escort. She was a married girl who also worked for the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective. She wouldn't have gotten in a car with a client talking about time machines and shooting his dad. But once she actually jumped in the car, though, then I reckon she would have been able to see the cracks appear. What an awful feeling. She got in the wrong car. His story is dumb and obviously not true, but I'll say it anyway to be objective. He says they drove to Burnside to discuss prices for different services, when Bella pulls out a weapon, smashing him upside the face. In response, Van Hemert pulls out his own 20-centimetre blade and stabs her repeatedly. All I would take from his version of events is that he stabbed her repeatedly in Burnside with a 20-centimetre knife. That part would be right. After the sick, depraved 43-year-old plasterer was done, he went for a drive up State Highway 1, then circles back to Christchurch Airport, where staff would call police about a suspicious car in a restricted area. He was in a maintenance area that's off limits to the general public. Police get there and her injuries were super bad. She got stabbed in the face 12 times. Stabbed 7 times in the chest, defensive wounds, all on her hands and left forearm, also cuts to her leg, and her throat was cut. Her skull had been hit repeatedly with blunt force injuries to her skull. A rock covered with blood was in the car, a couple of knives, and an AWL tool, AWL tool. I'm not sure entirely what that is, some kind of plastering tool, I guess. I don't know. Van Hermit later admitted to police that he stabbed Bella Tapania multiple times, going on to say that he sliced and diced her. Wow. I don't actually think we've got a dark enough dungeon in New Zealand to lock this fella up in. When all this went to court, the result was really weak, eh? I mean, this is one of the reasons I started my channel. I want to point out to the New Zealand public that the system's broken. And I'm not talking about the cops in this case. They actually did pretty good, I think. It's just, Anyway, I just don't get it. The Christchurch judges are useless. Listen to this. Justice Anne-Marie Doogie sentenced Kane Van Hemet to 10 years in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 6 years and 8 months. Yes, 6 years and 8 months minimum non-parole for stabbing her in the face 12 times. I mean, I don't know, I'm just, words are failing me at the moment. Alright. That judge, she just didn't like sex workers. I mean, she looked at Kane Van Hemet and thought of him as a naughty kid who broke a toy fire engine to get some kicks. New Zealand's such a small world that judge probably judged Bella Tapania in court in the past. I haven't really looked into any of the murdered girls' criminal records, but it's likely that every one of them had a criminal record for something. She just saw Bella as a criminal nuisance, a slut. If this guy didn't murder her, some other client would have got the job done. I actually reckon they need to dismantle the court system and build the whole thing again from the ground up. There must be some good judges out there, but the arrogance, in this case particularly, but many others too, is just... They found one of Bella's footprints on the inside of the windscreen. She was trying to kick the windscreen out to make an escape. The useless courts would eventually do something right, and they increased his sentence to 11.5 years non-parole because the Crown appealed the weak sentence. And what I don't get is, if somebody's completely bonkers, I thought they get found not guilty by reason of insanity. I'm glad he got found guilty, but as a New Zealander, I would personally want the judge to start with 19 years without parole and maybe reduce the sentence 1 or 2 years maximum for mitigating mental health factors. I'm not saying that the guy was in his right frame of mind, but he planned the murder. Come on, I mean, he at least planned to stab an escort. That's why he swapped his plates out on his way to the red light district. Hey, Justice Anne-Marie Doogie, as a New Zealand citizen, I'm telling you, you are useless. I demand you resign in disgrace. You're an awful cow. After all was said and done, Dame Catherine Healy, the boss of the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective, spoke up, asking society to change attitudes towards sex workers, and she's right. So let's not use words like slut, whore. It's just negative rubbish. These girls were all killed by clients. Well, almost all of them. New Zealand failed in its duty of care. So let's move forward with some whimsical